Morning
Here we are, season 2, episode 6. At a bit of a
already.
gap. Yeah,
Yes,
but we were saying it feels like ages since we've spoken, right?
I know. I missed 2 weekends. I was away on a vacation, basically holidays, and yeah, and it was just not practical to have the call. I hesitated having it last week, and then I thought, you know what, this is just not going to work.
That's
I was
fine.
hanging out
You
with
were seeing
family.
family, right? Brother, sister.
I was hanging out with family, brothers, sisters, mom. My cousin was around there as well, which was really cool. We had a day up in the mountains to go sledding, and otherwise I had great food and just spent time with my nieces, which was really, really cool. And my brother
Mm.
moved to a new apartment, and it's been redone. Anyway, the soundproofing is barely existent. So
Okay.
being able to, I wouldn't have been able to find a room where it was quiet, be able to
and
record with you, and it
and
wasn't practical time wise. It's like basically lunchtime almost, or breakfast time, late breakfast, early brunch. It's brunch.
nieces and nephews as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, those pictures were great that you
yeah,
sent.
yeah. It was great. It's You know what? It's funny because in January, when I was just updating, and I think I told you this, but I didn't say this in the recording, and I think
Mhm.
it's okay to mention. But there's one side of me that is, or a lot of other people, there's like, okay, well, this is a dud of a year. Bring on 2022, because it's just this year we're just waiting for people to be vaccinated while we're living through the various whatever's being imposed on us to deal with the pandemic. Um,
So 2020 was a super dud year. 2021 is just a dud year.
yeah,
2022, everything's getting better.
perhaps we don't know,
Yeah,
but
well,
my
yeah.
point was that we don't know, but when I was in January, just updating what happened in 2020, what do I want in 2021, and I was
Mm,
like, presumably, it's looking like I'm not going to go anywhere. If I'm probably going to have, and I don't mean this in any horrible fashion, but I'm
mm,
unlikely to go visit my brother in Sri Lanka, for example.
mm.
Extremely unlikely. It's even unlikely that I would come to see you in London at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So presumably it's looking like I'll stay in France. It's looking like I will be able to still go visit my family in the south of France and my friend Jean-Baptiste, who lives around Bordeaux, and maybe a couple of other friends. Perhaps there'll be unexpected things, but presumably I don't know what's going to happen work-wise, but I'm generally reliable to be able to make ends meet. I
Mm,
don't know that it's going to be amazing. It might be. There
mm,
might be surprises, but this is what I can count on. And at first, it was like it felt depressing,
mm,
and then going back to the south of France is also like, well, there's worse fates because it's a beautiful part of the world. And if that's
mm.
all I get to do this year, like I did last year, that's not that bad. There's worse fates. There's a lot of people that have a lot of really tougher things to deal with. There's tons of other things going on, but I don't want to. We could spend an hour just catching up and not go into the question, which would beat the point of having the episode.
Yeah, but it's a tangent.
It is
And
a tangent.
the picture I just posted on Instagram to say that we're about to go live, there's a postcard. Actually, I'll show you that my wife got me, and it says on it, "It's okay if you mess up,"
Nice.
and that's the post-it for Teaching Tangents season 2. And I have that
I don't
right.
think I'd seen that.
Yeah, put it. I only just posted it right now, right just before we went live. But the pink post-it is season 2. The blue post-it is also here for season 1.
I remember that one.
That's season 1. So I think that's going to be a thing. It's going to become that's
I
our
like it.
calling card, calling post-it. And also post-its for me are associated with the thinking and the ideas of having, having lots of ideas and then changing them and
Yeah.
like coming up with those are different tangents, I suppose.
Mm.
And today I've got what I think is a really good question. But before we get to the question, which t-shirt have you got on?
I think so. I'm running out. I don't think I'd worn this one before. The Mr. Brightside. Had I worn it? I can't remember.
I think you've worn something like it because I know the symbol is a weather symbol, but I don't think you've
I
worn.
might
You've
have
worn.
worn it. I'm not
Have you
sure.
got? Have you
I'm
got a
running
green?
out.
Have you got a green one with that kind of symbol on it?
No, I have a green one with I have a green one with the watermelon that cut its smile out.
Oh, maybe
but
it's
it's
that one. I'm
completely
thinking of.
different.
Okay, so I don't think you've worn this one. Have you seen this one?
No, I don't think so. Soul
Got it.
Rebel, The Colors of We.
Yeah,
Is that an album? Seems
I
like
don't know.
music.
I got it in the US, in New York. It's not an album, but I just liked it because of the colors and the outline of the person and the color of we. To me, it speaks of we're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all in it together. And I randomly found it yesterday and I was wearing it. I'm wearing it today.
Right.
So I was talking to some pupils on Friday, and
I'm
they
still
were
wearing this one thing. I'm wearing this all of winter, by the way. Like most of the time when I'm
hoodie.
hanging at home, well, it's one of my warmest, and it got cold again today, even though it's a beautiful day. I don't know. I don't know why I feel like I have to apologize for wearing the same hoodie all the time. It's kind of one
Who
of the things I
cares?
wear on Sundays.
Who cares? We're at home.
It's a very
fine.
comfortable hoodie, and it's really warm.
Maybe you should say where you got it so people can go buy one.
It was a Christmas gift. My brother got it for me from Canada.
Oh, well, that's why it's cool. And that's why I keep you warm, because it's from Canada, where it's designed for that.
Well, it's from Canada, but it is I think it's a Tommy Hilfiger brand.
Oh, okay. Well, even then, it's still going to be
Not
good.
technically Canadian, but it's got, anyway.
It's got fur on the inside, so you're warm.
Yeah.
So on Friday, I was talking to two pupils, and they've just had exam week, and we were just talking, and they said to me, this is actually really useful, just talking about stuff. And I was the
conversation you had with them.
Yeah, the conversation.
I can only imagine that's one of the things that is in short order, which is time to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even have anyway. Sorry, keep going.
But but I was being quite opinionated, as I usually am. And then I asked them, do you have any questions for the live stream I'm doing on Sunday? And they went, are you still doing that? I was like, yes. What's yes, of course. We're in season 2 now. Season 2. They're like, oh, okay. So I asked them, do you have any questions?
We need to find people who care about our show. We've not, aside from each other, we've not identified a proper audience.
Well, who knows? But I don't really care about that yet. But the question, one of them said, I think is a really good one, and it's got lots of bits to it.
Okay.
So here it is. The question was, do you think there will be a knowledge gap in the future because of teachers inflating the grades to get people into university who might not deserve to be there? And then do you think this will affect productivity in the workforce in the future?
Is that because of like COVID or in general?
I think he means mostly COVID, because at the moment,
I know there's conversation about that in France as well.
Oh, really?
Also because there's been kids who haven't been in school or in extremely difficult situations, so we're being pretty lenient. But then again, it's the first time I teach, so I have no idea what not being lenient or being lenient actually means. But anyway, cool. So may possibly related to what's going on now, and I know there's already a lot of talk in France, at least, about the people who graduated who will graduate this year and last year, their diplomas or degrees are not worth anything. The baccalaureate is not. I mean, I'm exaggerating the point, but some people are saying that. Some people are saying they're undervalued because basically, like, the baccalaureates were given to people, which I don't believe they were at all, but some people say that. But then again, I was just listening to a podcast episode diving deep into people who believe in conspiracy theories. So there's a lot of people that believe a lot of really, really weird stuff.
That was a good catch. I would
consider to be weird.
That was a really good catch that you said stuff. That was very good.
I'm learning a little bit, slowly. So anyway, but let's just pick the question apart, because there's a few things that come to mind.
Yeah.
There's a few things that definitely come to mind. So first, actually, do you mind repeating it? Let's go over it again.
So we should, I'll go over the whole thing, and then we'll take it maybe bit by bit. So the core of the question is, do you think there will be a knowledge gap in the future?
Yeah.
That's the first bit. And then he said, because of teacher grades allowing more people into university who maybe didn't deserve to get there because they wouldn't have got the grades if they sat a real exam.
Yeah.
And then will that affect future productivity in the workforce?
Well, so there's a lot of different ways to approach this, of course, but the first thing that I'm thinking about in terms of knowledge gap is specifically down to the question,
Mhm.
not to define what a knowledge gap altogether is, although a little bit going in that direction, but this is specifically to do with education and teaching.
Mhm.
And there's one big thing first is that the program determines a lot of any kind of whatever you might imagine to be a knowledge gap first, as in the curriculum. Sorry, the curriculum.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
France,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
called the programme.
The
Sorry,
program.
I'm
Yeah, that's
reading a
fine.
little bit more in French and doing stuff in French at the moment. We could talk about, we should do a quick overview of all the books we're reading at the moment at some point as well. So there's also talk, and I would love to know more about that because you may well know. There's a lot of talk, articles, people say that the level of high school is not as high as it used to be. And I've seen some examples in France that seem to be pointing in that direction of making things easier and easier. So I would point that to being one of the first things of the knowledge gap. And it's not necessarily towards any teachers being easier lenient on the kids and letting them go through to the next stage.
Mhm.
Whether that's true or not, it would be also very difficult to quantify, I think. So that should be part of the something that we explore as part of the question.
Mhm.
Equally, like, what does the knowledge gap mean? Is it down to, in this scenario, it seems to be letting pupils go to university that presumably wouldn't be ready for that, but
That's what
depending
he's
on
getting
what
at.
standard and the number, for example, I would say that in my experience was 20 years ago, obviously more than that, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is more.
It's more than that, 24. But I didn't feel ready to go into university once I was there, but I had all the grades I needed. I don't think anybody was lenient with me. I passed through. There were some areas where I wasn't, some
That's a
areas
good
where I was
point.
strong, some areas where I was weaker. And then when I realized what was asked of me, and I think I only realized what was asked of me in university much later. I
Mhm.
didn't understand what was being asked of me in university. I seemed like I was getting bad grades and I didn't even understand why. I thought I was doing the work.
And this goes back to what you said about not knowing how to construct an essay unless
Yeah.
you're taught in the right way by the right people, by the people in your life, and
Yes.
all of that jazz.
And there's so anybody who has support from their parents, from their environment,
Mhm.
private tutors, I don't know, teachers have a huge leg up on people who don't.
Yep.
Now, I think there's probably a lot of alleviating factors for anybody who goes and finds that information on the internet now.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure you could easily, but now it takes time and it takes
Mhm.
a lot of effort. But say if I'm a pupil or a high school student that doesn't have the family environment, but I have YouTube, then I can probably go find tutors who explain all that stuff to me on videos, which I didn't have available at the time. I also was not that interested in spending that much time studying, to be really honest.
I use YouTube videos from specific channels to support my teaching because
Yeah.
there is a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, there's a lot. I know my brother follows a history university professor from Belgium who like just gives entire like 3-hour long lectures on all sorts of topics. And he loves that stuff. He laps it up. And I know you
It's
can
there.
find just about everything. So and I don't know. So actually, the first straight up answer is I have no idea because I don't have any of the frames of reference to be able to judge intelligently or with any kind of data or information any of the elements of the question. Because you'd have to give assessments to all the different elements, which that is something that we can definitely discuss. But regardless, I don't know enough about what's going on in education in France or in the UK. I have hearsay a little bit, but that would not allow me to point to any kind of like with any kind of knowledge whether anybody who starts university now is ready or not ready or less ready than anybody who did it before. And every year things change. I think. I mean, ish a little bit.
I think it's worth looking at what you may. I think
it may well be correct, but sorry, yeah. But maybe you have stuff to give me on that side.
But I think you made a really interesting point about when you went to university. you didn't feel that you were ready
Mm.
and for what was asked of you. And thinking about my own experience, I didn't feel ready. I felt kind of ready to study, but I didn't think I was any good at it. And I did okay. I did okay.
Yeah.
But the experience of uni and going away, I was absolutely not ready for.
Mm.
I was
Oh yeah, I
not
remember we
ready
talked about that, right?
at all. Yeah. So I wasn't ready. So one of the things that the pupils have said to me is, can you tell us about useful stuff like taxes and how to pay stuff and what a bank, like the details of like a bank account and what to think about when you're like getting a bank account or what a mortgage is and how a mortgage works. And they wanted to know that stuff. They didn't want to necessarily want to know about, I was teaching about psychology. They didn't really want to, okay, they've got to do that. And they appreciate that to get to the next stage, they have to do well at this stage. But they want to,
those are things that were not of interest to me at all.
They want to know about the real stuff.
I mean, I don't know. What is there to know about having a bank account? I mean, like, have a bank account. Just try not to overspend. Spend less than you earn. I don't know.
They feel.
Now that was just me. I mean, I know that there's complexities to this whole thing, right? You could maybe I should have known. I should be more interested in that. I don't know.
But I didn't. I felt that when I went to university, I felt very, very, very immature and
because
not ready. Well, yeah, but
I mean, not you particularly. Everybody. You're 18. You're a kid.
But compared to everyone else,
18, 19. Oh, you thought compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
But how did you base? What did you base that knowledge on? Because that's like that. It sounds like that kind of imposter syndrome that everybody would have.
Yeah, like I don't know if everyone else was thinking the same thing as me, and they probably were.
Probably most.
Yeah, I was basing it on people seem to know how to talk to girls, how to behave when they went out, how to like even the library, how to study, how to find things in the library, and how to write an essay. I thought I knew how to write an essay, and I thought I was pretty good. But then I remember looking at some other people's work and thinking, that's really good. How did you know how to do that? And that guy kind of goes back to what you were saying about maybe you didn't know what was asked of you, what was demanded.
There's a correlation. I mean, there is still a correlation with the amount of time you spend studying and the kind of support you have with the quality of the output, right? And at 18, I was just not that interested in studying that hard. So I studied to have decent grades, but there are a lot of people that were probably much better than me. And I have very little experience teaching. I only started teaching in September, but I can see within the classes I have, there's a variance on the quality of the work that they produce.
Is it like that? Or is it like?
It's very difficult to say because I also don't have any frame of reference. I think that it's all pretty good. So I don't think between the best and the not best is not a huge. It depends how high my standards are as well, but because I don't really realize.
But I think one of the points you made when you were marking is, and I think a way of kind of benchmarking or measuring it would be your own expectations of what you thought they would do, because there were points where you thought.
But that's not the point. But just to finish the point I was going to make was that.
Yeah, sure.
Is that I don't know about their lives. The person who has a much better essay versus the person who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is, because I don't know them really. I don't know why that is. I can imagine easily that one of them spent a lot more time studying than the other. For what reasons? Go figure. Does it matter? Not in the moment I'm grading. And everybody's got their own lives and their own priorities, and so I guess this speaks to the knowledge gap. Like, how do you measure that? The grading is a way to measure it, but grading is only a way to measure it against the curriculum that was set by this Ministry of Education.
Which as we talked about says a lot.
That what is the standard of what should be known, which changes and apparently seems to be going on the downside.
Yeah. So
As in, like, less knowledge is required to to have the same A levels or baccalaureate.
this is one of the points that I make. So there's a couple of things about this. One of the I hear people say similar thing in the UK, like,
And is
exams.
it true in your experience? I have no idea.
Well, this is
Because
kind
you're
of
a
what
teacher, so you know, you might. I mean, maybe you're in the middle of it, so you don't know. I don't know.
I'm a little bit in the middle of it, but I hear a lot, like, older people when the exam results come out, inevitably there's people who go, standards are dropping, there's too many people getting too many
Yeah.
high grades, and I think to myself, on the one hand, they're talking from their own experience as older people,
Yeah.
and when they did exams, and then on the other hand, that's a really horrible thing to say to the young people who've, like, tried in really challenging circumstances, or even in normal circumstances that are pretty challenging anyway, to do their best, the vast majority. And then my thought experiment was, what they did a program on a BBC program, I think it was a few years ago, where they got children now, school-age children now, to sit exams from the 1950s, and they couldn't do it. And they were like, oh, it's really hard. And I was like, that's stupid, because you can't get a 50s kid to now and get them to sit an exam now. There's no fair comparison. And I'm like, so a kid in the 50s would, their head would explode. Like, how would they were negotiating life nowadays. What would it be like? And I like to think it's an
Well, I
unfair
don't know.
comparison.
I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, why wouldn't a 1950s kid be able to sit a high school math exam? Is it that different, math in high school? I don't know. Is it really?
The exams are different.
Now, of course, this is a thought experiment. We'll never know.
Well, exactly, we'll never know. But the fact that they made kids now sit an exam from the 50s and then say, exams have got easier, I thought was a bit annoying, because you can't do the other way around. You can't really do a fair comparison, and it just leaves young people nowadays feeling even worse than they already feel. But
because again, I think what's really unfair about this, aside from this is clearly like some kind of clickbaity experiment, is that it should not be on the burden shouldn't be carried by, the weight of the burden shouldn't go to the students, because it's not their pupils. It's not their responsibility. This is a question of, again, I just like banging on to the fact that it's the Ministry of Education and the curriculum. The failings are down to the system, not to the students. Or if there were any failings, right?
And grade inflation, as the phrase that's used here, is considered a failing. And if people that sometimes what happens here is you get young people who, I mean, like my nephew's age. So my nephew's 11 now, which is kind of scary, because he could be in the senior part of my school and I could be teaching him. So what happens is parents with children that age will tutor them to get them into the really good schools. So there's tutors who specialize in doing the exams to get into the grammar schools and the really good schools. Now, when they've been tutored to within an inch of their life to get into those really good schools, and they get into the really good schools, they find it really hard because they've been tutored to get there. So then the parents tutor them. So then you've got this whole set of people in a really good school, plus you've got the sub-market of tutors getting paid to get those people through the school. But there is other people who sit the exam and like, yeah, it's fine for me, I get it. You know, they're naturally inclined towards those exams. Then they get into the good schools and they perform fine. So you've got these two kind of groups of people in a really good school, the ones who are there and are fine with all the academic challenge, and then the other people who've been tutored to get in there because their parents wanted to get in there, who completely burn out by the time they're 15, 16 and can't stand being in school. And that's in the high achieving schools. And I think that is what is, I think might be happening in the workplace. You got people who've done really well through uni, start working, and kind of what we've seen before about the whole thing about millennials not being able to like jump from job to job and not getting that they have to put the work in to get good at something. Or unless I'm being patronizing as an old person.
A little bit, but probably a bit of both.
But I think that's something, but which goes back to exactly your point about the way the school system is. The syllabus barely changes, the textbooks barely change.
Oh, in
And
France, the syllabus has changed. The textbooks change. They remove a lot of stuff.
every year, what, every couple of years?
Well, certainly in the last 24 years. I don't know. Every couple, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly how much.
I can
But
say
I know,
that,
for example, that this is something that I like a specific that I learned recently because I had no idea that in high school they made history in the last year of high school. There's a common trunk of history, and that there's now most of it. The most of what was the syllabus, the curriculum that I learned in the last year of high school is now optional, which is most of the 20th century history from the Second World War on, the First World War on. And this was stuff that was knowledge that was taught that you needed to pass to get to the baccalaureate. And now it's no longer knowledge that is required.
So how will they do the baccalaureate?
Well, it's just you still get the baccalaureate has changed.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I see. Wow.
So I'm sure if I go and dig and find out, I will be able to give you more specific examples of how the curriculum and facts that will corroborate the idea of older people going, well, the level's not like it used to be, to be like, well, actually, it looks like that's correct. That it doesn't invalidate everything that you were just saying about people studying for big schools, except the studying for high school here is different because you just don't. It's all it's all localization. It's geographical.
What do you mean by that?
I mean by that you go to the high school that you are in the sector of.
So then what this?
You go to the high school that is closest to you.
Yeah.
Where you live. So you might have the choice of a couple, and then it might depend on some of the options that you take. You can possibly go to a further one if they have an option that you want to study, like, I don't know, Chinese, and it's not available in your local one.
Okay.
But those cases are not the same as they used to be. I think it's changed, but I don't know how exactly.
Because what happens here is sometimes you get families moving house to go to a better school.
Yeah, exactly. Here too.
All right. Okay.
Friends of mine just bought an apartment to be able to make sure that, well, partly to have an apartment in the location of the best schools so that their kid can go to a better high school.
Yeah.
So they have an address there. They didn't buy it for only that reason, but really it was a strong, strong driver.
I think
so. Or kids can go to high schools that are now. That's a whole other conversation on the quality and level of different high schools, their rankings. Because guess what? Of course, at least in France and I'm sure in the UK, it's like if you go to a really beautiful, rich neighborhood, that's really, really good high school that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So the people that live there get much better education than people in a poor neighborhood.
Yep.
And typically the way the teachers are trained here, they have no training on the job. You graduate from your thing and you're sent to the worst schools and then they burn out.
No training on the job, really?
No,
wow.
It's like 2 weeks. Because French academia, the French training is very theoretical in nature, always. So if you study to become a teacher, you have the degree to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Then they throw you in front of a class.
To school.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think there's literally 2 weeks of classes on how to be in front of a class. All the rest you have to learn on the job. And you just you will be put in some of the worst areas of school. So you're dumped in front of a class of kids that come from really difficult neighborhoods. And you have no training on how to be with kids, how to be with a class, how to teach, very little to nothing.
Wow. So burnout. Yeah. They just leave after like 3 years.
There's a lot of burnouts.
Wow. That makes me think the system here is a bit better.
It is better. Well, having talked to you back in the day and our common friends were also teachers, I know there's a lot of faults with the British system, obviously, like every educational system. But if there's one thing that seems to be a lot better, is the way that teachers are trained.
Mm.
In
And
France, it's just basically
there's
not
multiple
trained.
routes in the UK. You don't have to go like the degree and teaching degree and whatever. You can have another degree, do another thing like postgraduate, and then become a teacher. That's what I did. But then there's like,
I'm sure you can do that in France, but I'm not sure exactly how it works.
but there's loads of ways in, which I think is pretty good. And most of them, you have to be in front of the class as part of your training. Because there isn't, you can't teach people that. It is like riding a bike. You get on the bike, you fall off. You go in front of a class, you mess it up, you think about why, then you try something else. I don't think there's any other way of training to be a teacher. None. Although I do think that training to be a teacher gives you so many transferable skills, it's ridiculous. Being a teacher, there's so many transferable skills, and they're massively, massively unappreciated. So it's
that I knew intellectually, and I've been experiencing how unappreciative. Not I'm trying to find the right word. It doesn't matter. I'm thinking of a word in French, and I can't think of the word in English or the equivalent.
What's the word in French?
It's not the actual word, because the word is ungrateful, but it doesn't mean anything to say that it's an ungrateful job. It's I don't know what the other word in English is to say. It's a thankless. There you go.
Yeah. It can feel that way, and there are moments where it's not. But you've really made me think in what you said about how much of what I do is dictated by the government says this, the exam boards produce the syllabus, and then I teach it, and that's.
Well, if you want to talk, that's why I think it's really important, because your work, whatever you may do, even if you do over and above the general, like not yours, but let's say all teachers, is determined by the structure that in the frame.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Anything to do with any kind of knowledge gap of people ready or not ready to go to university, and we can address the grading a little bit later and whether people are giving too many grades or not. I think that's a stupid, grade inflation, which I think is a crazy term, but very interesting.
That's the term.
In my opinion, if you are given a framework, and if it's deserved, then give the grade it deserves. And then if you think that the kid doesn't know enough, or the student doesn't know what they should, then that's not the pupil's problem. It's a problem of the structure. Now, who decides what should? It's political. It's huge. It's
completely
absolutely political in nature. And I've been reading a lot of this kind of stuff at the moment. So
what book are you reading that's making you think about this?
I've read George
Good
Orwell's.
segue.
Yeah, it's a good segue. George Orwell's. These are really, really, really good. They're all available online. They're all available online, and yes, you should read them. Why I Write he's got four essays, but really most of this is covered by one big essay in here. And in Why I Write, he lists out 4 different reasons why people write, in his opinion. And the 4th one he calls political, and he talks about political in the broadest sense of the word, which is to say that you want to have an impact on the world and the way it's organized.
Yeah,
you are moving towards changing something in the way that the world is organized. And then I've started, because I don't read enough in French, and I started a new practice based on my brother's recommendation, which is cool. So every morning, 20 minutes of a more complicated.
That looks like a hardcore book. I just saw who the author was.
I'm reading several hardcore books. This is a hardcore book. This is in English. It's called Punishing, and what is it called again in English? This is in French. It's called
Surveillance and Punishment.
Surveillance and Punishment: the Birth of the Prison. The word is not surveillance, but it's surveillance, but it's not translated as such. It doesn't matter. It's surveillance and punishment. This is intense.
Does he talk about the Panopticon in that?
He does, yes. I haven't gotten to that point at all, but I've heard about that. I've heard that's where he talks about that. That's one of the issues. But slightly different. But the introduction to the book is where he details what the book is about. And Foucault, I don't even know which category this book belongs to technically. It's like somewhere between philosophy, sociology, and something. I'm not sure. It's like a human science type thing.
Okay.
but he describes the fact that so the first he talks about the framework of the legal system and the way that the way that punishment's given out.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts with describing a punishment that is extremely corporal in the
Okay.
late 18th century. And then another one, which is like less than 70 years, 75 years apart, I think 74 years apart,
Mm-hmm.
where the whole system has changed. So like the first one is massive torture, something that's absolutely medieval and horrible
Mm-hmm.
from the body. And then the second is a very cold, clean description of the timetable of prisoners within a prison. And he talks about how the whole punishment system is moved from something that is inflicting punishment on the body
Mm-hmm.
to something that's more inflicting something on the soul and not necessarily touching the body, but removing people from society and all sorts of other stuff that go along with it, which is still affecting the body, because if you're imprisoning somebody, it's affecting their body, even though the legal system says that it doesn't. Anyway, I didn't want to go too far into that. I'm only at the beginning of the book, but my point was that he describes at the beginning the framework of the legal system, and he's like, the same way he's making a parallel, that he wants to describe the body of the way the legal system functions and change in terms of punishment.
Yeah.
The way that we punish people in society.
Yeah.
So there's something similar to be said about education. I'm sure there's other writings about education. I just don't happen to be writing one.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole framework is what informs the anything to do with knowledge, anything to do with a gap. And we've talked about this type of stuff before.
No, this is very good.
It's
what you're saying is
political in
brilliant.
nature, because
Yeah.
it's the state that decides. I mean, and we're talking about big entity, but because it's a machine, it's not just one person. But the state decides exactly what the population should or shouldn't know at what age, and but with what goal as well. What's the aim? And the aim is perhaps for the population to be good, working, operating citizens, law-abiding, operating citizens in the whole society.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, I would imagine. And I would imagine that for the most part, examining what the objective of education is not something. I'm sure there's a lot of people researching and doing that, but they're not necessarily at the Ministry of Education, because they have a lot of other work to do than thinking about that.
But what you're saying,
I could be wrong, but I don't know.
No, but the idea of
these are not the only books I'm reading. I have a couple more.
But the thing about the structure, I think what you're saying is brilliant, because as a teacher, I'm so like this with what I'm doing that I don't ever take a step back and go, or if I do, it's instinctive, and you manage to articulate it for me. I don't always relate.
You're doing things on a personal level, and you might be doing a lot better than other teachers, but for teachers overall across the whole country as a body, you're executing the orders that have been given by the framework of the Ministry of Education. And so you personally can maybe do better than the rest of the body, but overall you as a body, you're only conforming to whatever is asked.
It's so true. So true.
Not as a bad thing. That's just how it works, right?
It is. Yes. So to a slight tangent, one of the reasons, have you watched The Wire? Have you ever watched The Wire?
No, still not. No, I know.
So one of the reasons I absolutely love The Wire is because it completely fits with what you just said. People think it's about the drug trade. People think it's about different aspects of the drug trade. Ultimately, it's not. In my opinion, The Wire is about how the institution always wins.
Yeah.
No matter the individual.
I mean, I've not seen The Wire, but it's kind of, that's back to the Leviathan, which I've not read, but Hobbes. Is it Hobbes?
Oh, I haven't read that. But the individual attempts, the individual tries, the individual does things that are cool and whatever, but the institution always triumphs, always. And that's the deeper, kind of more depressing thing about a TV series like that. It's literally it is an epic story of, all the hero's journey and the universal story.
Talking about that,
it's all that. It's amazing.
The biggest
it's another segue.
The biggest part of this,
is
an essay called "The Lion and the Unicorn: Socialism and the English Genius," and it's really, really good. It was written 80 years ago, month for month, February 1941. And his first sentence encapsulates a lot of really good stuff. I mean,
I really need to read this, and it doesn't
you
look
need
like
to
it's
read
very
this.
big.
No, as I write, highly civilized human beings are flying overhead trying to kill me. And he comments, there's a lot in there. That's a big, it's like most of this is like 80 pages, but it's really, and it's all of this stuff is free online, or you can buy the book. I'll share the links. And it's a long comment. So there's a lot of different stuff. One, there's a lot of beautiful ways he writes and describes England and the English, both beautiful and not. And he talks about different classes. He talks about a lot of stuff. But he has a lot of commentary on everything that ran up to the beginning of the Second World War politically in England. And there's entire pages where you can replace military and armament words with masks and vaccines, and you're like, this is just scary how little we learned in 80 years. And he places the blame, I think correctly, or at least whether you agree or disagree, makes very interesting, very clear crystal points, to unbridled capitalism, because everybody knew the war was going to be going on, but the big English companies and rich people, etc., I mean, to say it short, we're still pushing against each other to be selling raw materials to Germany 2 weeks before the war, even 10 days before the war started. And there was still, England, nor France, let alone, I mean, he talks about that a little bit, but he really focuses on England, was not ready at all, leading to Dunkirk. Which is a disaster. And so on the back of reading this, and he talks about socialism, and he makes really good points, describes exactly what he believes socialism to be, and he hopes that people will learn, and that won't go into unbridled, that people will wake up with the war to the fact that you can't just have unbridled capitalism. It needs to be focused and organized in such a way to save the country against this kind of crisis, because they were not ready. Just like we're not ready for a pandemic.
It just got worse.
It just got worse, which is fascinating. And again, this is not against capitalism or people making any kind of money at all, but it's the pursuit of profit against above everything.
Yes.
That makes it that you're not ready for any kind of unexpected thing. Like that's the Black Swan theory from Nicola Taleb, which is Nassim
Taleb.
Yeah. Which is a great book as well. I read that years ago. And,
I haven't read that.
That's really good. You should totally read that. I'd like to read his other books. I've not done that.
It's a trilogy, isn't it? There's three books, isn't it?
Yeah. And then on the back of that, last few days, I got more into watching other movies. So I watched, because I hadn't seen it, I watched Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, and yesterday, The Darkest Hour, which was interesting because it was like both two other parts from the same book, looking at what happened around Dunkirk, while Nolan, the action epic, what's happening, and then The Darkest Hour, politically, Churchill. It was cool to watch those things. And I think I'm going to follow up with, because last year there's another movie that came in France, De Gaulle, because I was like, well, wait a minute, those two movies were May 1940 and Dunkirk, which for anybody watching of your students is the complete disaster of the beginning of the Second World War. 300,000 English kids, just like military drafted men, like running away, and the French and the Belgian running away from the advances of the German army. And they had World War I rifles, not enough helmets, in front of tanks and Tommy guns. And they were stuck on a beach with all the German forces all around them, and they were all going to die. And all the English were saying, well, they're going to die. We should give up and surrender. And they brought Churchill in, and he had this crazy idea of bringing together the largest civilian naval fleet ever, which is basically, he asked all the people owning boats on the British coast to go and help and get the people out, and they got them out. So I think I'll follow up, because that was May 1940, and then straight after, the movie De Gaulle, which is like what happened with Charles de Gaulle and what was going on in the French, when the French gave up and he left to England. So I was like, wait a minute, I don't really know exactly much of his story. I think I've learned some stuff in high school, but I don't remember much. So I'll watch the biopic.
Which presents the cinematic view of a particular time.
Yeah.
Which is always going to have a different spin on it.
No, of course, and it's it's worth reading a few different things, but you can watch the movie as well. It's kind of fun. At least it's I
You
think
know
it's
what's
interesting.
so awesome about what you just did, to go from the way the tangent linked up from George Orwell, known for 1984. Davina's reading Animal Farm on audiobook, and she's got 1984. I'm like, it's 1984 is just like, oh my
And
god.
he wrote that after the end of the Second World War. And Why I
Yeah,
Write is one of the essays he wrote just before, because
yeah,
he
I remember you
talks
saying
about
that. Yeah.
yeah, and there's another small essay, 5 pages, on politics in the English language, which is fantastic. It's just like very specific how people write,
Mm.
and that he's like anyway, just worth
Because
reading. I'll send it to you.
newspeak in 1984 is like how media is right now, I think, as far as
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah,
And so
for sure.
you've gone from what you're reading, George Orwell, via films, all within this idea of what we learn comes from, is political, maybe from the language that we have, and also that, linking back to the idea, it's not the students that are bad, they're part of a system that has
Mhm.
said this is what you have to learn in order to be successful. And I think the other bigger point is, which we've talked about a lot, is how on earth can an institution like the government prepare young people for what's coming in 10-20 years with Yuval Noah Harari stuff like the convergence of AI and biotech
So I
and all of
think
that.
you just made me think of a couple more things before I get to your point, because I think it's very interesting to talk about the system. But if anybody's watching this from your students or any mine or anybody of a young people, might feel a little bit discouraged to think, well, if it's part of the system, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer there lies with what I was saying about you, which is you may not have what I was saying about you is you can be a great teacher. You can inform yourself about the system. You might not be able to change the system, just like in The Wire. And you as a student talking to our audience, you might not be able to change the whole thing. You can't decide what you're being taught and what the curriculum
Mm-hmm.
is. However, you have agency over yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be the best student you can be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what there is for you to focus on. You can
Agreed.
support others. You can look at what you're interested in. You can pursue and learn. And I was talking to a friend the other day and going, sometimes when you start going and thinking about those kinds of big situations, what's going on in the world, what's going on with education, whatever you're interested in, it gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it gets like, and then you're left with, well, what can I do? I'm only one person. Am I really going to be able to have any kind of impact? And it can be very discouraging. But I think where I went next is like, well, I can talk to my students, talk to my family, talk to my friends, learn, do the things I'm interested in. The best thing I can do is to learn to think and to teach to think. If
Mm-hmm.
there's anything that I can share on these videos, and the point of them is to be aware of what's going on. And we circle back to one of our favorite topics, which is to know yourself, and knowing yourself is knowing what you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So you as a student, the way to is so it's interesting to talk about the system. Really, what you need to focus on is you be great at what you are doing,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that the system is stuck in a certain way, or stuck, or set, or geared, or whatever, whatever word you want to use for that, is not an excuse for giving up and not
Mm-hmm.
doing the work yourself. Doing the work in this case as a student is, doing the work that's been asked of you, and keep learning over and above. And over and above may mean watching movies, anything that you're doing, sound editing, singing, rapping, I don't know, but not just consuming Instagram and TikTok videos, because that makes you a drone. That makes you drool out of your mouth and just lose brain matter.
It's so true.
Yeah, and I'm not against it,
Yeah.
but that doesn't develop your knowledge. That only
And
just zombifies you.
that's so great. I mean,
Now,
it's
if you
probably
create your TikTok videos and you zombify others, you'd be strong.
I think what we should do is, I think what you should do is get that last minute or two of what you just said, just edit that and put it on a TikTok video. It'd be like a Black Mirror episode or something. It would be something like that. But what you said was brilliant. It was brilliant. And I think what's different now from when maybe we were young is that now my students have a choice and have access to learning about almost like such or anything really. And
we did too. I had a huge encyclopedia back then. I mean, sorry, I cut you off.
I don't think it's quite the same though. I don't think it's
not.
quite the
I
same.
agree, it's not the same, but there's still a lot more knowledge that I can figure out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the opportunity that younger people and students have now is to be able to investigate anything that they find interesting and explore. And then the bigger opportunities to create something around what they're interested in, which is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I feel quite uplifted by your little soliloquy there.
Thank you.
I think it's very good.
So on my own interests, I'm reading this. This is so good. It's a
social and literary history.
A social and literary history of the Fool. I've had to have it sent twice. History. It's a history book.
Yep.
Social and literary history of the character of the Fool. It's a research book, 1935. No longer printed. I had to find it secondhand, and twice because the first book got lost. So I can only hope somebody found it and is using it. But this is so rich. There's like so many references to things I've never heard about before. It's awesome. So there's like the origins. I was reading about the Fool. So just to give you an idea of the kind of chapters in there.
So the Fool is a traditional kind of, is it medieval character?
Well, we're going into the whole history of.
Wow. Okay.
It starts with a professional buffoon, the mythical buffoon, the origins, and I've just finished the 2 chapters of origins. The Fool as mascot and scapegoat. The Fool as poet and clairvoyant. And these were like just a research of every single text possible from the Roman Empire, the Greeks, old Mesopotamia, Irish and English folklore, French, of examining all the seemingly historically correct characters and where there was any buffoonery, fools, and where they seem to be the same or not the same, and like where does an entertainer start and the jester end, or are these dwarfs or deformed people the same as the Fool or the jester? And it's super interesting. And the next chapter we're going into the medieval court jester.
And the idea of buffoonery and Fool, it sounds negative, but there's much more to it than that, isn't there?
Oh yeah, totally. There's a lot more to that, and there's no, for now, there's no clear definitions, because there's a bunch of different definitions depending on the historical context. But what's interesting is there's a lot of striking similarities between a lot of roles in different civilizations across history, of certainly the existence and or the importance, because they're there, of this character, but also difficult to pinpoint whether this is only one character or several, because it seems to be several at the same time, and several meaning so for example, in the Roman Empire, there were people that you would invite that were, I think they call them the buffoon. I can't remember the name. They call them buffoon, or basically it's somebody that would come to your party, and that makes fun of people, that is extremely witty, that might have some kind of deformity, perhaps, possibly, but not necessarily. Then there's the kind of people that were attached to their kings and the rich and powerful. Then there was the village fool, idiot, the village idiot type person. But there's a lot of, like, it's not clear. Some of them were the same person, but not always, because there's a lot of historically notions attached to folly, madness, and deformity, and not understanding. So there's either somebody is so the traditional is a dwarf, or somebody has some kind of physical deformity. They're at the same time shunned, and so outside of society, but also possibly they have something divine or magical about them. And so some of them are professional, like people who make other people laugh. But some of them have come to this as some kind of, because of their physical attributes, dwarfism, for example. So, but some of them are the same. So but it's extremely rich. There's a lot in there. So, for example, one thing I learned yesterday when I was reading, is the character of Merlin from the King Arthur.
The Arthurian legends,
Yeah, he's a fool. He's a magical. So his original name is Myrddin, and there's a lot of things pointing out to the fact that he has exactly the same attributes in traditional stories where this guy first showed up as a fool madman, because and that's just like themes through prophecies. So clairvoyant, prophet, aside and different from others, not necessarily the same person who makes you laugh, but there's a lot of striking
Makes you
resemblances
think.
with it. But well, no, they're prophets, so they have like magical abilities of some kind.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I don't know if so there's an interesting striking was they make a lot of so that's where they make the author makes links between wisdom and madness, because these characters on the side of madness, but you like when you look at the history of it, they're the same characters who were considered the wise ones, Merlin. So there's a direct link between the wisest and the maddest characters. So, and again, there's no striking or no definitive conclusions that the author makes at this point about, because this is just only in the origins, but the origins are fascinating. But what's for sure is that this character exists in every single civilization. It's not just one character but there are a bunch of different types of people that are associated with it. So it's multifaceted. It's fascinating.
And that book was published in 1935.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Wow.
And there's so many references to old texts I've never heard of that are fascinating.
Because that's making me think of Joseph Campbell's work with the hero's journey and the monomyth and all of that, which I'm planning on reading this year. But
yeah, I'm going to read it this year too. But
this is so much
to just go on one direction in the what we talk about with Harari, because there's for example, one of the texts that is referred to about the Greeks is one of if not the oldest written text about any civilization, complete written text, called the Banquet of Sophists. It's written by a guy, and it's 15 tomes. I don't know how big they are, but they describe a party, basically a big feast. But through the description of the feast, there's description of every aspect of society,
of course,
because they go into full detail about the food, about the wine, about the entertainers. So that's the part that she's talking about in this book. About politics, about political discussions, because they talk about what's going on in current events. And so it's one of the oldest written texts of any civilization that covers all aspects, or like most aspects, of the Greek civilization of the time, which is fascinating. And I had never heard about this thing before, so I want to check it out.
Wow.
I don't know if I'm going to read it, but it was just interesting to find out about.
And so to link it back to the question, that what you there's I think there's a one, what you're illustrating there is the freedom students have to investigate something that's of interest to them and learn about it using books, resources, whatever's around you. And
it doesn't have to be this kind of book. You might not have the same interest.
It could be anything you're interested in.
My brother in Sri Lanka sent me a super cool video. He's very proud that he was laying bricks with his son. They're working on a big garden. Anyway, they were laying bricks. So all that to say, it doesn't have to be fancy books. Bricklaying. No. You know?
It could be whatever you are interested in. And that is one way of being able to deal with how quickly the world is changing. One way of being able to support reinventing yourself, and one way of dealing with a potential knowledge gap between when you go to uni and when you go to work and when you're whatever you're doing, and keeping growing. And I think that might be the deeper. I mean, we've covered a few deeper things within Teaching Tangents about knowing yourself and learning and reading books. But I think the idea of being an adventurer and exploring and being willing to be open, beginner's mind, play, all of those things are what's going to, and perhaps reinvention is what's going to allow young people and older people like us to be able to still be useful as we get older. I mean,
and even one more thing about the question itself, even though this might not be the most satisfying answer, for any student, ultimately it matters. It's I'm going to say it anyway. I was hesitating to say the word. It's irrelevant. Whether the knowledge gap whether there's any change in knowledge about the university standards, it is probably irrelevant to your personal situation, whatever that might be. Because it is also a linear thinking, because you've been trained to do that in school, to think that there's a direct correlation with the things that you're learning, your grades, your degree, and the job that you will have, and the knowledge that you need to do that job. One, you have no idea what things are going to happen in your life. Just don't, and let alone what's going on in the rest of the world. We don't, nobody was planning on the pandemic and everything that happened after that. So that changes. And there is not a direct correlation translation between what you're learning at high school, what you will need to learn to go through university or to learn at university, and how that translates into a job. The only correlation, if any, is to learn a lot of stuff so that you can be better at thinking and reacting to any kind of situation, which is exactly what we're saying anyway here and what you just said. So I just wanted to make sure that I thought it might be useful to add that little point.
Great. Unexpected depth and breadth to the tangents today. And also, I think you need to go back and find that little thing. It's almost Alan Watts in the way you did it, the way you said it. I loved it. Seriously.
Thank you.
Like take your
I should
what
probably,
you said,
I mean, I know we talked about taking a couple of minutes.
Set it to music and like put it out there, because I think I might even see if I can nick it myself and play it to my students, because I think it's that good.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great.
All right.